On Sunday, in our local hometown newspaper, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, there was a special report on the Bosnians moving to St. Louis 20 years ago. It's a great story as we talk about immigrants and immigration and assimilation and what is it to be an American. The Post spent the resources and the time to go look at the Bosnian community. Doug Moore wrote that article and joins us now. Doug Moore from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Thanks for joining us. Turn your microphone on. There we go. How did this come to be? Was this your idea? Did they come to you? How did this all start?
Yeah, I'd been covering the community for the better part of 5 years, and I saw the anniversary coming. I'm like, 20 years, we should do something, but what? So we started the conversation last year and then decided exactly how were we going to do it. And I thought the best way to do it was go out and actually spend some time in the community, finding some folks that we would normally talk to. You know, there's always the same 4 or 5 people that you tend to go to as a reporter. But we wanted to find the people who are actually out there, living, struggling, excelling, whatever it might be. And we were pleased with what we found.
You spent 3 months on this.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Your beat is the Bosnian community?
No, it's diversity and demographics is my beat, which includes the refugee population.
Gotcha. Okay, It's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
How did these Bosnians get to St. Louis?
Well, as most folks know, a little history lesson, the former Yugoslavia, when the war broke out there in 1992, there were like 1.5 million people who ultimately fled. And the United States was one of the countries that decided, hey, we will bring in X number of refugees. We have a resettlement program here. And so St. Louis was selected as one of the cities based on a series of things: the housing stock, number of social service agencies available, the fact that it's pretty cheap to live here. So we started getting our first wave in, I think, the 35 families, 35 people early in 1993.
Did we give them $1,000?
We did not. I don't know exactly how much we gave them. You get so much per person based on how many are in the family.
Gotcha. How many ultimately resettled here?
Well, that's a tough number. We use 70,000 in the paper because that is the total number of folks we believe are here now. That's not the original number. That was probably closer to 25,000.
And so once they were here, then their relatives and uncles.
Yeah,
and
if you get
and...
resettled in a different city, it's like word of mouth. It's like, hey, St. Louis, it's cheap here. We got a job at this factory. Why don't you come and work? And then also just the natural immigration process. And then some Bosnians have been born here as well.
Right. They came here many of them not knowing one word of English, right?
Yeah, most of them are in that predicament,
yeah. 20 years later, is it safe to say that they have become part of the fabric of St. Louis?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, the assimilation, I think what's most striking about this particular group is that they have been able to fit in so well. And, of course, that begs the question, why?
Right.
One thing that the sort of the elephant that was in the room that we do address in that story is that they are white. And they are sort of Eastern European descent. Mm-hmm. And, our country is that's a very common look among us.
Right.
And so I think people it was easier for them to fit in. Once they look kind of like you and me, and that they only sort of maybe talked a little bit differently or had kind of a funny last name. So they didn't have that barrier that a lot of folks from the Middle East or African countries would have initially.
Why did they choose South St. Louis or that sort of Bevo Mill area? Is that where they were placed? Did they naturally gravitate there? Why was that area picked?
Mainly because working through the resettlement agencies like the International Institute, which is right there on South Grand,
right.
What they do is help them find affordable housing. And in the Bevo neighborhood, which was really, really down and out at that time when they first came in, there was an abundance of cheap apartments. And so that's where they started placing them. And so that just sort of grew, and then they started their own businesses there, and then they got into, hey, look, a lot of them were very handy, had construction trade, there were a lot of carpenters, those kind of folks, ended up buying the buildings for nothing, and then they just kind of created their own neighborhood
and then fixed them up and made them nice and rented out to somebody else. And
exactly. They became flippers pretty quickly. Yeah.
I've heard stories where doctors came over, lawyers came over. You said skilled tradesmen. These weren't just homeless Bosnians. They actually had a skill when they left.
Well, yeah, one of the sort of the dark secrets of resettlement is that we cherry pick those that we want. The folks who are the most educated tend to be picked first for the programs. So one of the folks that we profile in Sunday's story is two doctors. And Dr. Adina, she came in with her husband. They were both physicians, moved here. They were working in a factory, making boxes for Allen Foods. She went back to school, got relicensed.
They were doctors over there.
Doctors in Bosnia.
Came over here. And started working in a factory.
Yeah, because most law degrees, medical degrees, any sort of education is not recognized in the U.S. unless you get the education here.
Right.
So it's like, this means nothing to me. So, they did this. She had a 2.5-year-old child. So you fast forward today, she has her own practice. The husband is the office manager. They're raising 2 kids. One's a sophomore at Washington University. I mean, very successful family, but they had to basically rebuild, do everything they had done in Bosnia.
Doug Moore is our guest. Spent 3 months on a special report that the St. Louis Post-Dispatch debuted on Sunday. You can get it at stltoday.com. He's our guest talking about the Bosnians 20 years. Did you talk to anybody from the mayor's office, governor's office, senator's office? What would St. Louis be like if those 70,000 Bosnians never showed up? I mean, in some ways, didn't they save St. Louis City?
They certainly helped stabilize it in a lot of ways. Certain neighborhoods, Bevo especially. The unfortunate part is the cities of St. Louis itself was not really able to capitalize on it as much as they should have, in large part because of the schools. It didn't take them long to realize that there's not a good education option here, and that we can move, 5 or 10 miles south into the Lindbergh School District or the Afton School District or the Bela School District, which is one of the largest percentage of Bosnians, get a free education there, much better. Mm-hmm. And we can also get a house that's bigger and has a nicer yard, and it's perceived to be safer. So they were very clever about acclimating in that manner. And that's it's a good point. We didn't actually talk to city officials about sort of the lost opportunity there, but it's certainly something that should be discussed.
And the Bosnians quickly learned this, right? And so once they had enough nickels, they were off to Afton and other places.
Yeah, absolutely, because they lived very, very humbly and saved all their money. So it didn't take long for them to be able to buy a house or rent a house down in Afton or Bayless neighborhoods or down in Lindbergh, Melville school districts, and got their kids in schools. And
let's talk about the food, that Bevo Mill area and that Bosnian food. I have friends who go there all the time. They're as lily white as can be, but they just love their Bosnian food. I mean, it's almost like the Hill 100 years later, right? I mean, that sort of Bosnian community.
Yeah,
like
people call it Little Bosnia oftentimes, and because there are several restaurants down there. So if you're unfamiliar with the food, it's kind of, I don't know, it's very meaty, very hearty food. Not a lot of vegetables. So vegans would not be happy there, but meat lovers would love it. Bosnia Gold, by the way, was the first restaurant there owned by Bosnians in 1997. They've since sold it to another Bosnian family and now opened a bakery and a deli. So it's sort of, they just kind of keep the process going.
Right.
Yeah.
Soccer.
Yeah.
They have brought their love of soccer to St. Louis.
Indeed.
St. Louis has already been well respected with soccer. How has that changed the soccer scene here in St. Louis?
A great deal, actually. There's we're doing a series of follow-up stories throughout the year because we couldn't put it all into the Sunday's paper. And one is focusing on the schools, and one component of that is the soccer programs. Bayless, for example, has had a soccer program for years, but it wasn't until last year that they finally got into the state playoffs. I think they got third place, and it's because they have a large number of Bosnian kids. I mean, and they readily admit that. There's a passion there that drives them toward the sport and has really bolstered a lot of the programs. And then the exhibition game we had at Busch, I mean, there were Bosnians. They were online, buying all those tickets.
So Busch holds 56,000 50,000 people, and if there's 70,000 Bosnians, guess what?
Yeah, a large percentage of them were Bosnian, I guarantee you.
And a large percentage of them were Dorseys as well. Doug Moore is with us. He spent 3 months going back, looking at 20 years, the good, the bad, and the ugly, with the Bosnians who have resettled here in St. Louis. We're going to come back, talk more with him, STLtoday.com. There's still a link right there on the front page, right? Special report. It's still right there.
Yeah, right on the homepage. Click on it and take a read.
It is easy to find, and then we'll have this video up to complement that as well. Doug Moore, the reporter on this Post-Dispatch special report on the Bosnians. More with him in a moment. Doug Moore is our guest. He's a St. Louis Post-Dispatch reporter who wrote the special report that came out this Sunday in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch on the Bosnians and their 20 years they've been here in St. Louis. Before we go to a couple of phone calls, Doug, there were religious conflicts, which is the reason for the Bosnian War. Did the Muslims and the Christians and the Croats, did that argument continue over here, or why did we not see any of that infighting here?
Mainly because those who were resettled here were the Muslims. So they were the ones who ended up having to seek refuge. So we didn't see much of that here at all, which we had. The more of the conflicts were actually just sort of in the public schools where the kids were they were dropped into schools that they had never honestly seen African-American kids before. And there was a conflict between sort of race and culture and language. But over time that kind of got ironed out, but it wasn't a huge problem. Yeah.
What about 9/11? How did 9/11 handle or deal with the Bosnians and the Muslims?
It brought a lot of conversations to these kids. I mean, there's a boy, we didn't put this story, I don't think, in the final draft, but who was he was, I think, 8 years old at the time, and one of his colleagues or one of his classmates came up and said, "Why did you do this to us?" You know, and he's this, he didn't know what to say. He had to go home and ask his parents what that meant. Because he realized finally that this 8-year-old kid thought all Muslims were terrorists.
Right.
So it was a wake-up call for them. But, you know, again, I think the fact that they're white has been less of a problem for them.
Yeah. So Amy here is on line one. Amy, you have a question for Doug Moore?
Yeah, hi. I've lived in Afton for like 13 years, and I've got 3 kids in the school district. My oldest is in high school, and she goes to school with several kids whose parents own businesses. And some of these kids are driving some super nice cars. I know they're very industrious people, but I can never get a straight answer what kind of government assistance they're getting as far as migrating over here to get business loans and whatnot. It just, you know, she has Bosnian friends, whatnot. I'm just curious because it seems like they have, you know, kind of an advantage opening the small businesses.
Amy, thanks for the phone call. What did they get to come over here?
Every refugee that gets resettled here does get some amount of money from the government. They get housing assistance for, I think, up to 6 months. They get an EBT card, which is basically food stamps, which is a government-assisted program. But that over, I think, up to 180 days is all you get. Then you're off the dole. They have to enroll in an English class within the first month that they're here. They have to actively seek a job. And so, yeah, you do get, but they're not on perpetual assistance. I think everyone needs to know that. And there are micro loans for businesses, but those are open to everybody. There's a business incubators through St. Louis County and St. Louis City. So there are programs there, but I would argue those programs are available for everyone.
You have heard throughout the years people say that they were given an inordinate leg up or a easier chance than other, but you're saying that's not the case at all. They were given some food stamps for a couple of months and a small stipend to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. And the amount of money they were getting and the conditions that they were living, I can assure you, the neighborhoods that they were living in is not a neighborhood that you and I would want to be living in.
Yeah. 20 years. Are the next generation Bosnian Cardinal fans? Blues fans?
Yeah.
Rams fans?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the guys we profiled, he's a student at WashU. He's on the water polo team. He wants to be the Blues team doctor. He says he's bad at soccer, doesn't really have any interest in it. So, you know, we see that too. It's St. Louis. You got to love the Blues and the Cardinals, right? Or they send you home.
Right.
So it's yeah, you see that a lot.
Do they this is going to sound almost ridiculous question, but have they assimilated, not necessarily as Americans, but as St. Louisans? Do they go to Ted Drew's? Do they like Emo's Pizza? Do they go to the Muni? Do they ask what high school did you go to? I mean, how assimilated have they become over 20 years?
I would say pretty assimilated. It's kind of a dual answer. I mean, they still are very a tight-knit group, I guess you could say, because they do have that bond that's always going to be there. The kids go to school together, and the Bosnian kids do tend to hang out together. But yeah, they go get pizza, they go out and go to movies, they go to Blues games, and they go to Cardinals games just like everybody else. So
right.
It's just part of it growing up.
When the first wave of immigrants, the Italians, the Irish, they had that dual language. They still spoke Italian to their grandparents and yet spoke English to their kids. And then as the grandkids came along, they sort of lost that. Are we seeing that now with the Bosnian groups as they get older?
Oh, yeah. The parents and the grandparents definitely speak Bosnian in the home. The parents speak Bosnian to the kids, but outside of the house, the kids are speaking English all the time.
Right, yeah. Where does it go from here? We're 70,000 strong. That's including births over the last 20 years.
Right.
Looking forward, what happens to this Bosnian community? I mean, is it now 20 years from now? Are they going to be out in Chesterfield and St. Charles and in Wentzville? And I mean, are they just like we see Italians and Irish and German all over the place?
Yeah, I think that spread's going to continue. I mean, I do a lot of census stuff, and we see that the spread of our population continues to go further and further west. And the last profile I do in the piece on Sunday is a young couple who moved to Imperial in Jefferson County. They felt that was the best bang for their buck for a house. They wanted a lot of yard. They wanted a cheap house with 3 bedrooms and a 2-car garage. And I mean, the downside is they don't have a Bosnian market there yet, but he thinks maybe I'll open one. So.
Right. Has there been a downside, or what was the downside? Has there been any? Because it sounds to me like everything's rosy and perfect. Was that the case?
Well, no. I mean, I think with assimilation or integration, you kind of get the bad with the good, and we're finding that the kids are sort of taking on a lot of what suburban kids do. They sometimes turn to crime and they drug use and things like that. And we're going to be doing a follow-up story on that because, it's great that they do like to go to Ted Drew's and they like to go to Blues games, but they also, get into alcohol and drug use. And that can present its own problems because if they're not yet a U.S. citizen, then they could ultimately be deported if they're convicted of a crime.
How has St. Louis overall's embraced them, right? I mean, that's safe to say, no?
Yeah. I would say overwhelmingly.
Yeah. Has there been any outspoken group at the time 20 years ago or throughout saying, hey, wait a minute, these are foreigners, they're not from here? I mean, has there been any backlash from a group?
I wouldn't say an organized group. I think, if you're in Deep South City and you've lived there and folks are moving in next to you and they're speaking a language you're not familiar with, and there's it was funny. It wasn't funny at the time, but it's funny now. They were building smokehouses in the backyards, and they're people thought that they were roasting the dogs and cats, and they were also gutting the animals, and the sort of entrails are running out into the alley, and people are calling the police, and so the Board of Aldermen had to get involved and say, okay, you can't gut the animals in the backyard, and you have to restrict the size of your smokehouses. I mean, it was giving these poor little ladies over there on the south side a heart attack. But, they've worked through that.
Right, yeah. But very similar to the stories we heard of the Italians coming over, right? Bringing the old world ways to the Hill, and with the people who were there saying, oh, my goodness, what are you people doing?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. Why do you speak funny, I mean, it's just how, that's how America's built if you look at it.
Right,
so.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are a country of immigrants, and that's why this story is so interesting to me. It's because we're almost able to see our own history develop right before our eyes.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm a second, third generation Irishman. Yeah. So I'm now standing on the shoulders of my great grandmother who came over, who was a Bosnian 20 years ago, right? I mean, that's basically the story.
Yeah, and the kids that are growing up today and then their kids, no one's going to look at them as Bosnian. They're just going to be, Americans.
Just the way it is. All right, so the first installment was in Sunday's paper. You can get that now, and there's more coming down?
Yeah, we're going to have 3 or 4 more stories. We're going to kind of let them go over the next couple of months.
Yeah, it's the paper should be commended for the resources they put to this, because I told you on the break, Doug Moore, if the Post doesn't tell this story is lost forever. And it's a story of America, right? Bosnians 20 years ago coming over, refugees coming over, us opening up our doors and saying, good luck to you, basically. Here's 6 months worth of food stamps. Good luck.
Right. Yeah. And it's unique to St. Louis. We have one of the largest Bosnian populations in the country.
St. Louis Post-Dispatch reporter Doug Moore. Doug, thanks for coming in. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.